Good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the DeKalb City Council, July 24, 2017. Our city clerk, Sue Herman, please call the roll of the city council.
Jacobson. Fanouken.
Here.
Marquardt.
Here.
Fagan.
Here.
Noriko.
Here.
Verbic.
Here.
Favor.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
7 present.
I'd like to ask our police officer on duty tonight, Ray Hernandez, to please come forward to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Officer Hernandez. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Officer Hernandez. Next comes the approval of the agenda. And are there any additions or deletions to the agenda, including removal of any item from the consent agenda? Alderman Favor.
I would like to remove item F4 from the consent agenda.
Under the consent agenda, Alderman Favor has asked that we remove item 4. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been seconded by Alderman Noriko. Item number 4 reads, Resolution 2017-090, authorizing an agreement with the DeKalb Community Unit School District 428 to provide emergency medical services for DeKalb High School home football games for the 2017-2018 school year. It's been moved and seconded that we remove this item from the consent agenda, and we would replace that then for, under item G, items for separate action, as resolution number 7. Agreeable, Tony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any discussion on this motion to remove one item from the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda? Roll call, please.
Jacobson. Fanouken.
Yes.
Marquardt.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion approved. There are no public hearings scheduled for tonight's city council meeting. We'll move on now to item E, special items or presentations and citizens' comments. We have 2 items under,
Do we need to approve the revised, yes, we need to approve the
As
revised
amended.
agenda.
thank you. One of the pleasures of being your mayor is that I have a city council that is really on top of things. Alderman Marquardt noticed that we needed to approve that amended agenda. It's been moved by Alderman Marquardt, seconded by? Second by Alderman Fanouken. Any discussion on that? Not, roll call, please.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Marquardt.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Jacobson. Smith.
Yes.
7 yes.
Eagle Eye Marquardt, thank you very much. Okay, special items or presentations and citizens' comments. If you have an agenda, pick one up in the back. It's under E, item number 1. Proudly DeKalb is the first item. It was about 2 weeks ago when I received a letter dated June 25. Wonderful printing, just wonderful printing. You might be able to see it up there on the screen. From a young lady, Ella Matheson, 10 years old. And you know, I could have read this letter, but I said, why don't we have Ella come here and read this letter to us? Is that what community is all about? Ella, go over here. Alderman Fanouken will help you up those stairs. And I'm going to have you read the letter that you sent to me and the city council. Hi. You're going to speak real closely into that microphone, okay? And here's your letter. Do you want to read that? Please do. Get up close to the microphone now.
Dear Mr. Jerry Smith, I live in the city of DeKalb, Illinois. I went on a bike ride today with my mom and we saw that there was garbage all over the ground. My mom and I are going to go on a litter walk one day. A litter walk is where you go around your community and help the environment by picking up trash on the ground. I would like to make a National Litter Pickup Day when everyone in the community helps pick up trash. Even if that doesn't work, I would still like to do something about littering. I care very much about the environment. If people continue to litter, animals could get into it and die. These are some reasons why I think people should stop littering. P.S. Please write back soon.
Did your mayor write back to you?
Yes.
Good. Let's give Ella a big hand for being such a great citizen.
We should shake her hand.
Yeah, sure. Ella, would you go right across here? Mr. Fanouken over here is going to shake your hand.
You can go to the front.
You can go right in front there if you want. Okay. Thank you. Good job.
Good job.
Isn't it great that a young lady in our citizenry goes on a litter walk with her ma and starts picking up litter and then writes a letter to the mayor of her community? Isn't that something? That is great. Now, is there anybody here from Safe Passage? Yes, hi. Would you go to the podium, introduce yourself, please, and then we have a real treat for you on behalf of Safe Passage. Please.
I just have to say that's a really tough act to follow, but I'm going to try. So my name is Sarah Slavinas. I am the Communications and Prevention Services at Safe Passage. And for those of you who don't know what Safe Passage is, we are DeKalb County's only rape crisis center and domestic violence shelter. And all of our services are free and confidential. So we're going to be sharing a video today that we just recently had made. And kind of what's significant about it is that so much of the work that we do is confidential for very obvious reasons. But we were lucky enough to have 3 very brave survivors of child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and then also teen dating violence agree to share their stories. And I just want to share that this is a very powerful video, and it can be triggering to anybody who has experienced any form of power-based personal violence. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable, feel free to go ahead and step out. You won't offend me. If you all step out, I'm going to feel a little uncomfortable. But barring that from happening, I'm going to be okay. I want you guys to be okay too. And I will make sure to leave some of our business cards in the back if anybody needs help and just hasn't known where to turn before. That information will be available to you. Okay? So I think we can go ahead and get started.
Let's roll that video, yes.
Everything seemed really normal, really great. After about I think 7 months or so is when more of the physical abuse started happening. It wasn't just mental or emotional. speech would tell me that I was a whore when I didn't do anything to deserve that. There were a couple times when he would throw me on the ground and kick me. He would throw lotion on my clothes so I couldn't wear them in school because he didn't like that I was wearing yoga pants or leggings. He would chase me around with knives. He would threaten my family and tell people that things were gonna happen to my mom if I didn't stay with him. Or things were gonna happen to my dad, or he was gonna ruin my house.
The last time he put his hands on me, I had went over a neighbor house, and he had went out with some of his friends, and he had ran into some people that knew me, and he was told some things, and by this time it's about midnight, and he comes in and he confronts me about the situation, and I don't know exactly what my responses were at that moment, but he put me through a wall. I wake up that morning and there is a outline print of me in this wall, and the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, it was real? This was real.
I don't think I'll ever forget the last time that he abused me. I remember uncuffing me from the stand and taking me down the hallway. And I weighed maybe 70 pounds at the time, and I managed to push his 230-pound frame off of me. And I told him that he was never going to touch me again. His response was to throw me into a wall where he knocked me unconscious. And I woke up in my bed later with my clothes on backwards.
When we first started at Safe Passage, I think it was a week or two after he had been arrested, and the first things that I was able to learn about myself was that it was okay to be as hurt about it as I was. Now, my life is just a million times better. It sounds cliche to say that almost, but my life is so much better. I know what I deserve now in a relationship, and I'm not willing to take anything less than that if I didn't have Safe Passage. I just don't know where I would be today. I really don't.
I was hell on wheels when I first got to Safe Passage. I had so much stuff that was in me, that was coming out wrong. I was just reacting to everything, not responding to nothing. Safe Passage gave me a voice. They took away the shame that I felt. I felt so responsible. Maybe if I would have did this better, or maybe if I would have said that, it would have gotten better. They showed me that I'm worth it. I'm worth it. If nobody else in the world, not even my mama, loved me, I love me, and they made me comfortable. There would have been no way a couple of years ago I would have wore no overalls. I wouldn't have wore my hair with braids in it. I let my daughters do this. I've got self-respect now. Thank God there's a Safe Passage.
I would go and have counseling every day and begin to talk about just processing. It was the place where I started to realize that what had happened wasn't my fault. It made me feel like I could trust my own thoughts with that, and that people weren't going to be angry with me for what had happened. Safe Passage is the only domestic violence center and rape crisis center in DeKalb County. It fills a huge need for two subjects that are often really taboo. That is something that people don't really think is an issue in their community.
It's unacceptable that nearly half the population lives in fear all the time. It's unacceptable that the people who are impacted by these types of crimes often experience the lasting effects far more than their abusers do.
We are there to help people be safe. We are there to help them heal, but we are also there to help them get on with their lives and be successful in their lives.
If Safe Passage weren't here, DeKalb County would look from the outside the same. And that's because assault and domestic violence are not something that you see. That's what's hard about it. So we would have, DeKalb County would look exactly the same without Safe Passage on the outside, but on the inside there'd be a lot more hurt.
That's not how we want our communities to be. That's not how we want our schools to be. We want to live in places where people feel welcome and included and cared about.
To me, Safe Passage is a safe place to reestablish myself.
Safe Passage to me is hope.
Safe Passage was a haven in a time of crisis for me.
So obviously the kind of video part of that, the visual, was not working very well. I don't know what happened with the technology, but I assure you if I had anything to do with it, we would be looking at a blank screen. So if you do want to see the video the way it was created and intended to be viewed, you can go to our website and it's right there on the home page. And again, you know, if you haven't been to our website, it's just safepassagedv.org. And the website and our phone number are on these cards, which I will leave in the back.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
It was several weeks ago where the executive director of Safe Passage, Mary Ellen, came over and invited the city council and those watching that evening to the video presentation that you rolled out over at the Park District. And believe me, it was so moving that night. Full house, about I think 2 or 3 of our city councilmen. I attended, and you know, Gene Lowry and you had a couple of officers there that night. I know Safe Passage and the police department work so closely together, and we really appreciate that collaboration. So I thought instead of just saying, hey, they produced a nice video, which was produced by a local company.
OC
Is that
Creative,
correct?
yes.
Right. And I just thought it might be a good idea to show our city council and our viewers tonight. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Now we move on to presentations. Did I see Jerry Wright walk in? Jerry, come on up. Jerry is the Assistant Director of Nguzo Saba. This is the Human Services Funding Annual Report on behalf of his organization for FY 2017. And before you start, Jerry, let me mention that Safe Passage also is one of our human service funding recipients, and I think that was part and parcel of why we wanted to show our audience, you know, what they've done on their own, what they were able to get their own funding for, and I think that video was very, very good. Jerry, your presentation, please, for your annual report to the council.
Well, I don't have a video today, but I hope you all have received our report from Nguzo Saba. We submitted it earlier, and we just wanted to tell you that the program still continues to grow. Nguzo Saba Men's Club of DeKalb sponsors a basketball mentoring program in the summer to give our young people something to do in the summertime to be productive. We use basketball as a tool to get them into the gym. We do play basketball. We do have tournaments and things like that, but we also have different community members coming in to speak to groups of students. We have students that don't actually play basketball. They kind of come to watch the others play, but we have all of them sit in the gym and listen to our presentations. We'll have DeKalb or NIU police officers. We have professors and staff people from NIU that speak to them, talking about various topics, and we try to get them into career areas, thinking about those things. But basketball is kind of the main draw for the whole crowd. So all summer we do from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. We have different groups. We have the younger groups coming in, age 5 to it's 5 to 3rd grade in the first group, and we'll have high school and college students that work with them, training basketball skills and things of that nature. So this year we've had a few other organizations that have submitted funds for our program. We continue to try to grow the program and try to ask for less by diversifying and getting more from different factions of the community. And so it's been a great program. This year we have about 200 students involved so far. It'll be ending in a couple of weeks. We go 9 weeks in the summer, and that's it. That's about what we do.
Okay, before you leave the podium, are there any questions or comments to Jerry on this program? None? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, approval of the mayor's appointments. I have no appointments this evening. We only have a couple of vacancies on our 14 boards and commissions. As you know, we made a number of appointments and reappointments over the last month. We still have a couple, and I will be in a position perhaps to recommend those appointments to the city council within the next couple of meetings. Next comes public participation. If someone has registered to speak on an item on the agenda, we'll wait until we get to that item on the agenda. However, is there anyone in our audience who would like to make a comment on an item not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. As you recall, the items on the consent agenda are enacted in one motion. I'm going to read the following items separately and in their entirety. And if you recall, this consent agenda will be removing item number 4, which has been placed on our regular agenda, items for separate action. On our consent agenda, approval of city council minutes, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of June 26, 2017, minutes of the regular city council meeting of June 26, 2017. Number 2, receive and file accounts payable and payroll through July 24, 2017 in the amount of $1,665,672.37. Number 3, resolution 2017-089 relating to the participation by the mayor of the city of DeKalb in the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, IMRF, and what becomes item number 4, it was number 5 on the printed agenda originally, resolution 2017-091, authorizing the execution of a highway permit from the Illinois Department of Transportation for intersection improvements to Hollister Avenue and Sycamore Road by the Kishwaukee Water Reclamation District as part of the Phase 1B Improvements Project. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Been moved by Alderman Favor,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Fagan. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
We now move on to items for separate action.
We have to approve that.
we have to approve the listings on the consent agenda. What is the difference between approving the listings on the consent agenda and approving the consent agenda?
Yes, please.
This is the second time I've done this,
Yes, so
where I've sailed over something.
I think the city council could adopt a different approach to this if you wanted to. You and I had spoken about this. The historical practice of the council has been to approve what is on the, approve the group of things that are going to be considered as the consent agenda, as here's what we're planning on approving as a consent agenda, and then taking a separate motion to approve them. Just like in the past, the city council has at times taken separate votes to waive second action and to approve. I don't think there's any issue with the council taking those actions collectively if you're clear that you're seeking to have one motion to pass the consent agenda and all of the items listed therein. And as I had indicated, Mayor, it's at your preference how you'd like to handle it.
If I move that forward, should I put it on the consent agenda?
I think we can handle it just with the making of the motion to approve the consent agenda and pass all the items there.
Very good. Thank you. It's nice that even our city attorney once in a while becomes confused. You know, that's good. Okay, but we'll move forward. Thank you, Alderman Fanouken. A motion to approve the listings on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Been moved?
Second.
Second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, moving on. Items for separate action. Ordinance 2017-034, authorizing the provision of school crossing guard contractual services by Andy Frame Services for the 2017-2018 school year in an amount not to exceed $93,287, and amending the 2017 FY budget to include the total amount needed for crossing guard services in FY 2017 for a total of $98,457. Before we have Police Chief Lowry and Police Commander Leverton to come to the podium to speak on this item, I'd entertain a motion to bring it to the floor.
So moved.
Been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call, please. No, we're not, that's right. This is only putting it on the floor. Okay. Gene Lowry and Police Commander Jason Leverton to continue to talk about this. I think you did this at our last meeting also. Thank you.
Thank you, council and community and staff for allowing this opportunity to come before you. The last time we met, we discussed this in great detail, so I'm going to try and summarize this fairly succinctly. We did provide you with a history going back to 1987 with a program that started with six positions to date that goes up to 22 positions twice a day in regard to crossing guards. We talked about the process itself, how those all came to be. We just can't find a process. What decisions were made? Was there any logic to determining how many crossing guards should be on the be serving the community and their children in the school district, and by what methodology, if any, existed? And there was none. So we moved on and did an analysis, and that analysis took into a variety of factors, those that we had mentioned previously. But ultimately, what this boiled down to was a challenge, and the challenge was the demand for servicing the crossing guard program from start to finish, and the impact on police services on a daily basis when police officers are backfilling positions for crossing guards. We gave you some data. That data stands true. There were too many times that the police department had to put a police officer on a corner when they had to stack police demands for services or calls for services from the community while we were tending to a corner. We brought all this information to the council and to the Finance Advisory Committee going back to the budget preparation cycle for FY17, fiscal year 17. We got some direction. That direction really amounted to saying, let's do an RFP and see if we can find a professional contract service provider. We did that. We brought those results back to you. We also took them to the school district. And since we last met, I also made a presentation to the school board in regard to this process, much like I did to our last meeting here before you. We have found a vendor, and through that vendor, we were very fortunate. It was a vendor that staff recommended that was not only highly qualified and had great credentials, but was the lowest bid. So that was very fortuitous for us. However, in summary, the main objective is to have safety for our students. And it's not only a benefit through this contract service provider to provide that service, but it'll also allow the police department to do the things it's supposed to do in a public safety realm for our community overall. So, goal one, safety first. A well-managed professional program and vendor, all of which we've delivered to you, and an initial cost savings of almost $20,000 just in this contract alone. We are going to ask you tonight to give consideration, please, to waiving this and moving it on past the second reading because of the timeliness in regard to coordinating with the vendor, which we have already begun doing, but to get it up and ready in time for the school session to begin. We are continuing our discussions with the School District 428 regarding the transitioning of the program and its future sustainability. That's well underway, along with several other initiatives we have to iron out with them. And again, the reason for that delay is the big change in leadership, which did set everybody behind. With that, I have Commander Leverton here. We can address any other questions you have. I wanted to give you a thumbnail sketch of where we've been, why we're here tonight, and ask you for any questions or any consideration.
Discussion, questions from the City Council. Alderman Fagan.
I came in late. I'm going to apologize 2 weeks ago, but I just want to make sure, and I'm sure it's in here, I'm just looking for it, but for background, they'll do all the background checks. Andy Fran.
Yes.
Alderman Jacobson.
My only comment to this, other than I think it was what we needed at this point to start addressing the issue, was, again, this wasn't an issue of necessarily bean counting. It was an issue of getting the services we need and providing the level of service at the best price. And while price was certainly a motivator here, we found that we could find additional efficiencies by going out and bringing in someone in to take care of these services, and we reap the additional benefits, certainly in the police department and elsewhere, from doing that. So while cost was certainly a concern, it wasn't merely a bean counting decision that made this. It was a good, well-rounded decision to address a need effectively.
Well said, Alderman Jacobson. Any other comments? Chief Lowry, Commander Leverton, thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor. No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Item number 2.
Jerry, I'd like to move to waive second reading and approve.
Okay, it's been moved by Alderman Fanouken that we waive second reading on this
I'll
as
second.
requested. Seconded by Alderman Fagan. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you for everything, Council. I know it's been a long process. I appreciate it. Alderman Jacobson, I'll eat my bean counter words there. My apologies. Alderman Fanouken, nice catch. He's a Sox fan. I can understand it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. I think that was as Dave said, it wasn't just a financial kind of decision. It was a decision that made sense, certainly for our police officers, for the city, and hopefully for the school district also. Okay, item number 2, ordinance 2017-035, amending Chapter 23 of the Unified Development Ordinance, Article 3 definitions, Article 5 zoning district regulations, and Article 12, off-street parking, loading, and storage requirements regarding micro distillery and distillery. This is for Catamount Brewing Company Incorporated. This is the first reading. Our Community Development Director, Joellen Charlton, once again. Joellen?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am filling in for Dan tonight. The applicant for this case is Catamount Brewing, who is looking to relocate their micro distillery out of Genoa into downtown DeKalb. Originally, he approached us about a location in the lower level of the house building in downtown DeKalb. Our current UDO doesn't make any provisions for a principal use of a distillery or a micro distillery. So as part of that process, in order to allow them to come to our community, we needed to have them go through a process to create language in our code that would identify them, allow them in specific districts, and regulate parking. So they are the applicant in this case, but it is in fact a text amendment which is being requested. As the mayor indicated, we are recommending, along with them, changes to several sections of our Unified Development Ordinance, our UDO. So in Article 3, we have created definitions for both a micro distillery and a distillery. So again, we worked with them to expand this to cover more than just them. So if we get more of these businesses coming into the community, we'll be able to accommodate them without having to go through another text amendment process. Also changed were provisions in Article 5, which are the zoning district regulations. And in that section of the code, we are suggesting that we add micro distillery as a permitted use in the GC General Commercial District and in the Central Business District. And to add distillery, which is the production of more product, as a special use in the GC, the LI, and the HI Heavy Industrial District. So those are the categories in which they'll be both permitted and special uses. Finally, as the mayor mentioned, we did include some provisions to Article 12 to amend the parking requirements and basically followed the same formula that we use for restaurants were established for this type of a use. The Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct their public hearing on this case on July 5th, 2017, and made a unanimous recommendation to approve this particular case. Also included at the back of your staff report is a request letter from the applicant requesting waiver of second reading based on the unanimous recommendation. So I believe we do have the applicant in the audience today if there's any questions that you'd like to ask of him. One other thing I'd like to point out is the staff report talks about the location, and the original request came in to be in the lower level of the house. Once the Planning and Zoning Commission made their initial recommendation and he started through the approval process with the Building Code Division and brought his plans in and we started that evaluation, we learned that there were some issues in being able to provide adequate access and accessibility to that lower level. We went through the process, we looked at some alternatives to help them potentially stay in that location. I think we were able to address the accessibility issues of getting down into the space. The next issue became the length of travel between the one door that they really have access to. So it really, I think, came down to dollars and cents. It doesn't make sense to make all of those accessibility improvements if you can't have a big enough space to do what you need to do. Our economic development planner, Jason Mishnick, has been working with the applicant on an alternative location. We're doing very well in that regard. I don't think we're ready to make an official announcement yet, but it looks as though it will not be in the house location, but will be in an alternate location in downtown DeKalb. And as soon as we have any more information on that, we'll provide that to you. Happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Fanouken.
I just want to make one thing clear that we're talking about with the distillery, micro distillery, with them being submitted under the same parking regulations as a restaurant. But if they do locate within the central business district, that will not apply. That is correct?
That is correct.
I just wanted to have that made clear. Thank you.
There was no changes to that section.
Alderman Jacobson.
I got several comments related to this one. Not necessarily the zoning district, but it was the handicap accessibility and other issues that were being brought into question. So I appreciate that was certainly something that the city was on top of in this case, and I look forward to them finding another location in our downtown that'll work for them.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I believe we need a motion, and we can include the motion to waive second reading as part of the original motion. Can we do that, Dean? Or do we need a motion to approve and then we can waive second reading?
The council has never taken those both as one
Okay.
combined motion.
Well, we don't want to start now, do we? I'd take a motion to approve this ordinance.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
The waiver of second reading was requested by Andrew Nordman, who is the owner of Catamon. And I see you are the magistrate of fermentation. Wow, what a title. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make or not? Did Joellen do a pretty good job for you? Okay, very good. I'd entertain a motion to waive second reading.
I make the motion to waive second reading.
And waive and approve.
Waive and approve.
Waive and approve, yes. Thank you. Been moved and seconded that we waive and approve second reading. In second reading, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
I wonder if there's a magistrate of Robert's Rules.
I think it's Bill Fanouken.
I thought I would need the primer on that, Alderman Jacobson. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 3, Resolution 2017-085, authorizing an agreement with Northwestern Medicine, doing business as Kish Health System, for public improvements and site development. First of all, before we get Joellen on here, I know she'd like, well, no, I think we're going to put Joellen on first. She'd like to make a slight tweak on what we have before us. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Yeah.
Mayor. Thank
Please.
you. Very happy to announce after many days and weeks of negotiations, we have come to an agreement with Northwestern on an agreement that both parties are in agreement with. So even as late as this afternoon, we were making a minor tweak. I think the latest report that you had outlined some differences that we were still discussing. The reports up to date have been very detailed, so I'm not going to go through all of that. I just want to give a little bit of a background so that we know, so the public knows what we've approved and what's being forwarded for your consideration. Where did we start with this? So way back at the beginning of the year, late last year, beginning of the year, Northwestern, through some advice they'd received from the county zoning person at the time, thought that they could just come in with their development project on a building permit. They didn't know that special approvals were required, so they really hadn't done that type of due diligence that they might have otherwise done. With a change in staffing at the county, they learned that they needed to go through a zoning approval process. So as part of that process, the city received notice of the project that was moving forward. As part of that process, we looked at what was being proposed and the obvious impacts that we felt it would have not only on our roadway system, which they were going to be accessing, but they were also, as we reviewed the plans, proposing to connect to our stormwater utility. As part of, and again, this was all very fast and furious when the meetings were happening and we had a very little amount of time to do some traffic analysis and provide comments to the county zoning hearing officer who was reviewing testimony and charged with making a decision on this case. Once we went to their meeting and made some recommendations, we were able to talk to both the applicant and the county about something that would work and get them through the approval process, because again, they wanted to keep the process moving forward. The county zoning hearing officer recommended approval subject to a signal being installed on Bethany Road at the point where they were accessing our street. subject to further study and analysis that would come at a later time. As we completed that study, subsequent to the county zoning hearing officer's recommendation, our analysis of that suggested that in addition to that signal, to make it work safely, we felt very strongly that our analysis that we were doing required a turn signal or a turn lane to be installed in both the east and west directions to accommodate the signal and prevent rear-end crashes from happening, because right now there's just 2 lanes in each direction. The applicant's traffic engineer had a little bit different take on the situation. So that began the series of long discussions and negotiations that we've had. We went through a lot of alternatives through that process, and ultimately, I think, putting aside the fact that our traffic engineer said one thing and their traffic engineer didn't agree, the agreement that we're at this point suggests that they're going to go ahead and put the signal in addition to the turn lane. So they did come kind of full circle in acknowledgement of the city's desire to have that improvement in, and in exchange, we've given them the ability not to have to do an annual traffic study every year and put some escrow money aside, go through that process, and then, you know, go every time look at an agreement and determine whether or not the warrants have been made to add any new improvements to the intersection. So we really felt that was a step in the right direction, and really started focusing in on the agreement with that in mind. So again, I'm going to hit on some of the highlights of the agreement. It is included in the packet, and as well as a new copy of the agreement has been provided at your seats tonight, and I'll explain the one change that was made there and the motion that we'll need for you to consider moving forward. But again, the highlights of the agreement include the roadway improvements, specifying that we have the traffic signal and the opposing left turn lanes on Bethany Road, with the signal interconnect, the signal located at Bethany Road to the west of Greenwood Acres Drive, or at Greenwood Acres Drive. This improvement will require the alignment of the north leg of the intersection, so leading into the property. It's a little bit offset now. He'll need to work with the property owners to the north in order to get the appropriate easements or acquisitions that are going to be necessary to make those improvements to allow that correct alignment. The agreement also includes the installation of any underground infrastructure for interconnection. The restoration of all sidewalks and parkways adjoining the project are also included. As part of that, they're also required to secure acquisition or rights-of-way or easements or whatever they need to construct these improvements. The timing of these improvements is going to be tied to the earlier of either their actual occupancy or the issuance of any temporary or final certificates of occupancy by the county, but not later than July 1st, 2019. If Kish goes through this process of trying to secure all these improvements, and if for any reason decides that they cannot complete it within the prescribed time, they will need to provide notice to the city by March 1st, 2018, and then the city would take all of the steps necessary to complete the project. Again, with the intent that it would be completed at their cost, and intentionally to try and complete it by the time they are hoping to open for business. We also spent a significant amount of time talking about what do we do in the future to make sure that if future development happens on this site, which again is unincorporated, so it's not something we would normally be notified of, how can we incorporate into this document language that would require them to notify us, and what process we would go through to review and determine whether we needed traffic studies or any other kind of study, and that part took a really long time to work out all those terms. We did work out the last term, which was related to that issue, late this afternoon. So again, as I mentioned, the agreement that you have before you tonight does make one change to the first sentence in section C, future development, paragraph 1. And that is just a very minor change to change the word usable to gross. We're talking about when they're increasing square footage in the project. That change is acceptable to us. So I did provide the mayor with a sample motion that you can use to approve this item tonight, which would be subject to one minor change in the first sentence in section C, future development, paragraph 1, to change the word usable to gross. And I did provide that to you. I can help you with that if that's something you need to do. The clean copy provided reflects that change, as well as leaving the change in that we had recommended that we discussed this afternoon. If there's any further questions, I'm happy to answer them. We do have several members of Northwestern here as well, if you have questions for them.
Right, and several members of the Northwestern crew have indicated they would like to speak to this item. But first of all, we're going to have to put it on the floor, and I understand, Alderman Fagan, you have a motion to make.
I've got a motion. I'd like to, that we approve Resolution 2017-085, authorizing an agreement with Northwestern Medicine, also known as Kishwaukee Health System, for public improvements and site development, subject to one minor change in the first sentence in section C, future development, paragraph 1, to change the word usable to gross.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Fagan, seconded by Alderman Markwart. Any further discussion at this point on this motion? We'll vote, or would you like to say something prior to the vote? Okay, then let's vote on this then. Roll call, please. Yes, Alderman in favor.
So you did answer one of my questions, and that was what happens in the future if there's any development. One of the questions I had then is, I think this is the appropriate time to ask this question, because we're about to vote on it, correct?
Yes, it's very appropriate, right? Mm-hmm.
So is the city protected in the event of future EPA stormwater changes? That was one of the things that we discussed in our last meeting, is making sure that the city's interests are protected. Is that in this agreement?
Yes, I believe we've covered that provision in the agreement that you have before you tonight.
Okay. And then the only other question I have is, obviously the agreement is written for 20 years. What happens to, let's say, in year 21, the EPA makes stormwater changes? Is this agreement null and void? Do we have to, in year 20, we have to create a new agreement, or how is?
I'm going to turn that to Dean.
How do we protect the city in all of a sudden 20 years now?
So there are certain provisions of the agreement that do survive termination of the agreement.
Okay.
Separately, there are conditions in the agreement. If there is future development within that 20-year period, the city has the ability to restart that clock periodically and extend the term by additional 20-year periods.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is future or further development at the campus, that could also be a potential to address it. The third, I guess, line would be, in the event that there is no future development, or we're 50 years from now and the hospital is a fully matured campus and this agreement has terminated, if there is a superior governmental mandate from the state or federal government, that is something that would be effective regardless of the jurisdictional issues. So we wanted to make sure that we had language in ensuring that we would continue to comply with the then current standards for as long as possible. We had initially discussed longer terms, but we were looking to find a term that was customary for development agreements of this nature, and that's where this rounded out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Are those two questions answered, Tony?
Yes, thank you for safeguarding the city's interests. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the term that was substituted, the substitution of gross for usable. So does that mean that really any expansion, even relatively minor, on the campus of the hospital will be subject to city review?
It's subject to discussion. So this is something that we had a lot of dialogue back and forth on. So anything that happens can be subject to a reasonable, they need to provide us notice, and then we'll go through this process of having a discussion to determine whether there's impact sufficient that would warrant additional study.
Okay, so this just kind of triggers a process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other discussion? If someone would have told me 30, 45 days ago that this would come down to the date of a city council meeting with one word, I would have said, no way could that happen. But believe me, As I've sat in with our staff and the staff from Northwestern, I can tell you that it has been exhaustive. It has been in a spirit of goodwill. It's been in a spirit of community. And I commend both staffs. Most notably, our City Attorney Frieders and our Community Development Director, Joellen Charlton. I want to thank you for all your work as we are prepared to vote on this evening. Alderman Fanouken.
Mr. Mayor, since the Northwestern folks are willing to speak, I'd like to hear them speak before we actually vote.
Prior to the vote, Alderman Fanouken, that we could do. Jay, would you like to begin the process, and then perhaps you can call up anybody other, Dan or Charlie, if they'd like to speak, or Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I think it'll just be myself. If there's any technical questions, Charlie will be here. Councilman Favor, your earlier comment regarding the EPA, we shared that concern and always felt that would supersede anything, and that we would always make those changes. And memorializing them in the agreement, we were always 100% comfortable with. I'll make my comments brief. I just wanted to personally thank City Council, the Mayor, and City staff. This has been I wasn't going to say exhausting process. I think exhaustive process was the right way to frame it, Mayor, and I appreciate that. As the new president of Northwestern Medicine Kishwaukee Hospital, I have one role, and that is to bring the vision of the health system here to DeKalb County. That's to be an integrated academic health system delivering world-class care near where our patients live and work. Our job is to bring that world-class care here to the city, to City of DeKalb, City of Sycamore, and DeKalb County, and to enable that. And this program itself actually does that. 2 quick vignettes, hopefully to give you some comfort as to what we're doing. One, the Northwestern Cardiovascular Program is the 6th leading program in the entire country. The leader of that program was hosted here at the hospital, I think it was just last week. And we were there and we were talking about how are we going to ensure the citizens of the county have the ability to get full access to that program with minimal time of having to go east, but rather that it can be done here. And this particular project was a part of that conversation. He's excited about it, we're excited about it. My first meeting this morning was actually at Delmore Hospital, another Northwestern Medicine hospital, and I'm driving out and I'm passing their health and wellness center. And I looked at it, and it was just a vivid reminder of what we're creating here. This is something really special. It's not just the hundreds of jobs to build it. It's not just the jobs going forward to run it, but the asset to the community as companies want to come here and look and see that this is there for their employees, et cetera, to use, and to ensure the ongoing health of our community and the attachment to the program. We are doing something special. And driving by that really reminded me of that. I appreciated this process. I'm just 2 months into the role. The mayor and I started at very similar times, so this is a great introduction for the two of us. And I fully understand, and we at Northwestern fully understand, the 2 major concerns around stormwater and traffic. And hopefully what you see in this agreement is our long-term commitment. We're here for the long haul. We're going to be here hundreds of years from now, long past any of us in this room, and our job is to be great citizens of this county. And those 2 main areas are where we touch each other, and this agreement really memorializes that. The discussions on ongoing development was a long discussion of what's the right way to do this. We're in a unique situation, but what's the right way to do it? And I hope what you see in that agreement is our commitment to be great partners, great notice, that we're working transparently with each other throughout. I think Joellen highlighted a few things. We didn't always agree on all the underlying facts. We've learned a lot about traffic studies. It would be great if they were just black and white. You got done, you do A versus B. It just doesn't quite work like that. And so while we didn't quite get there on agreeing on those underlying facts, what we were able to do is say, this is an agreement that allows us to do 2 things. One, get this project done, get this to everybody in the community on the time frame we'd all agreed to a long time ago. And then number 2, a reasonable process going forward. So it's our ask tonight that you could approve this. And we look forward to bringing this asset to the community.
Thank you, Jay. Any further discussion or questions? Anybody from the audience wishing to speak to this? Before we take our vote, this gets down to 3 jurisdictions, DeKalb County, the city of Sycamore, and the city of DeKalb. I'm told that as we see the left turn lanes, and we are in those left turn lanes, going west on Bethany Road, as you enter the left turn lane, you will be in the city of Sycamore. As you turn, you will be in the city of DeKalb. That's how close we are in terms of those jurisdictions. Roll call, please.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Moving right along, item number 4, Resolution 2017 Yes, Alderman Verbic.
Just going back to Alderman Favor's motion on waiving the second reading, was there a second on that?
We don't have.
This was a
Is it
resolution,
necessary?
so it would not have a second reading.
Never mind, thanks.
Is that satisfy you, Mike? Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 4, Resolution 2017-092, authorizing a second amendment to Development Incentive Agreement, DeKalb Shopping Center, Development 1612 to 1718 Sycamore Road. She doesn't leave the podium.
I'm still here.
Our Community Development Director, Joellen Charlton.
Thank you. This is my last item tonight. As some of you may recall, as part of the Puri DeKalb request to modify the agreement that was in place in order to accommodate the ATI, which was a non-retail user, we had a related amendment to an agreement that we had with the developer, First Rockford Group, on the DeKalb Shopping Center on a different location. Part of that agreement needed some revisions and they needed some additional time. And as an incentive to the city, they suggested that they wanted the ability to improve the parking lot, provide some additional lighting, do some landscaping improvements. They are moving forward with that improvement. They got a little bit of a slow start at the beginning of the season because of all of the rains. And as part of the engineering design for the new landscape islands, they need to accommodate some changes in the flow. So long story short, it's taken them a little bit longer than the originally anticipated completion time frame. So they're really all this really does is ask for a couple of additional months to complete that parking lot construction. That's really the story for this entire amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'd entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Fanouken. Tony, you had a question.
I'm not wanting to badger the developer or anything, but is October going to be the date? 'Cause I'm willing to go to January if that's the date, but.
I'd like to keep a little tighter. I think they're close.
I know, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if that's the date, I'm happy with it, but, I don't want to necessarily
date
say
they
it's
asked for.
October and then we have to come back.
Yeah, I understand. It's the date they asked for. If it's the desire of the council to extend that, that's certainly possible to make that amendment to the motion, but I know that they're moving forward, they're getting plans in. I think their intent is to complete by that date.
I mean, I think the whole council, their desire is to see it completed.
Right.
And it's going to be a good
It'll
addition.
be a great benefit to that shopping center.
Any other questions, any discussion on this? I understand the attorney for First Midwest, Mark Strauss. Mark, do you care to say anything to this tonight? Okay, very good. We had no questions for you. It's been moved and seconded that we pass this resolution. All in favor? Roll call, please.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Joellen. Appreciate it. Item number 5, Resolution 2017-093, authorizing a payment to Hampton, Lenzini, and Renwick Incorporated for supplemental engineering services and land acquisition expenses for the Kishwaukee-Kiwanis multi-use path in an amount not to exceed $35,466.42. Before we have Tim Holderman come up and explain this, I'd entertain a motion to move this for consideration.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Marquardt,
Second.
second by Alderman Verbeek. I'd like now to ask our Public Works Director, Tim Holderman, to address this issue. Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to turn it over to Greg Chismark, our acting city engineer, who's been working with our consultants on this issue.
Good. Greg?
Thank you, Tim. Mayor, council members, I'm Greg Chismark, WBK Engineering. I know most of you have seen me, a couple of you maybe haven't, so I just thought I'd introduce myself. I'm the municipal practice principal at WBK. I've had the pleasure of working with your staff over the last several months as the acting city engineer. This item, of course, is in regards to the Kishwaukee-Kiwanis multi-use path and is a result of unanticipated and necessary engineering that was completed in the prior year. So this work was done with the final design. That design was completed, the project was bid out, and there's a successful bidder. We've even had the pre-construction meeting. During the time that design took place, there were a number of changes that occurred, some of them through the regulatory agencies that had jurisdiction over the project, and also the Union Pacific Railroad in terms of protection of the path as it went under the railroad. There is detail in your packet, and I won't go through each of the items, but generally speaking, there was some additional survey that was required and requested by city staff of Hampton, Lenzini, and Renwick. There was some additional hydraulic analysis. There was really a regulatory requirement that was not foreseen. And probably most notably, and then again in your packet there's a breakdown of those costs, is the structural engineering related to the protection of the path as it goes under the railroad. There was also some additional lighting, and there was a minor amount relative to land acquisition, some recording fees that was not in the original agreement. The mayor correctly cited the total amount of this request from Hampton, Lenzini, and Renwick, $35,466.42. Support documentation has been submitted to myself and city staff. We reviewed it. They made some revisions based on our review. The fee went down slightly from our initial review, and it is before you tonight. I do want to mention two other items before I ask for questions, and that is that we anticipate these additional fees to be funded through motor fuel tax fund, and that this can be accommodated in the budget as a transfer of funds from the Dresser Road Sidewalk project. Again, that's noted in your packet. That project is not proceeding because the grant through the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program was not successful. So that's how we're able to accommodate the supplemental fees within the budget. And with that, I'll ask for questions.
Alderman Enrico.
I have a question about timing. Was this additional work done by Hampton, Lenzini, and then the city became aware that this was beyond the original scope of the project?
Very good question. So I was not here when this was happening.
Yeah,
so I'm talking, but my understanding was there were discussions with staff at the time, and the request for the survey, for example, the additional structural work, that as the design proceeded, that the staff who was here at the time, there were discussions with Hampton and Lenzini. I can't speak to exactly what was discussed and the values and dollar amounts, but I know there were prior discussions with city staff regarding these supplemental fees.
Okay, certainly, I understand that issues come up in projects, and you've kind of been put into the middle of this situation. I would hope that in the future, you know, especially for an amount, and to my way of thinking, $35,000 is not an insignificant amount of money.
I agree.
That, you know, the council would be advised sooner rather than later. And again, you know, this is all water under the bridge or the bike path or whatever, but, you know, I think that this is a situation that in the future, I would hope we wouldn't, you know, see occur.
I understand.
Thank you.
Alderman Fagan.
All right. So why I see this is it was a bid out situation, right?
For the engineering services?
Yes.
The engineer was selected as a result of qualification-based selection.
Okay.
So, and again, that was done prior, I was not involved in that
Right,
original
right.
selection process, but they submitted qualifications and a proposal, a price proposal.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. So the original amount was $35,466 and some change, and now they're coming back and they're saying another. Am I right?
No, the original contract, so let me back up half a step. So the original contract for the design work with Hampton, Lenzini, and Renwick was $199,473.30, according to my recollection and notes on what that contract was. So that was the original amount of the design contract. So this amount here before you, now, I don't want to complicate it, there was a land acquisition contract that was about $11,000 as well, but the primary contract, we'll call it $200,000. So this is about an 18% increase on that contract, if we looked at what the original scope and what this addition is.
That's where I was trying to get. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I'll say this again in response to the commentary. You know, this is not a pleasant thing for me to bring forward, and I'm not happy about it, just as you're not. You shouldn't be. But I can tell you this, is in working with Hampton Lenzini moving forward, there's been a number of conversations about the construction contract as well as their construction inspection contract and staying within the budget. So, you know, it's going to be hard for us to go back, but I think moving forward, that sensitivity to it, and there's been, again, a number of conversations already about that as we presented this to the council.
Yeah, I recognize.
We'll do our best.
I recognize that this may not be your best presentation, but you know, and I appreciate the fact that, as I said, you've kind of been put into the middle of it, and I'm confident that, you know, efforts will be made going forward, that you don't have to have another unpleasant presentation or send Mr. Holdman forward.
Any other discussion or questions of Greg? Alderman Favor.
So, one of the questions is, have we gone back and looked at the original scope of the project? Because one of the questions that I look at is kind of in the last section, is about, you know, the electrical and lighting plan. Was there not? I mean, that was one of the things when we first talked about bringing this project forward last year, is how dark that part can be. Yeah. I think I specifically made that comment that we need to look at lighting in the area and make sure that their safety is number one on the path. So that we're now coming back and having to look at the electrical and lighting plan makes me question the scope at that time. Also looking at, now this, you know, might be new, I'm reading it and thinking, okay, that's maybe the railroad is requesting something new, that we maybe put some sort of is that what that is, a guarding over the top of the path for 30 feet each side of the tracks?
Yes, the protection, the structural element, which is the most expensive, was the request to provide some fall protection for debris onto the path and protect the pedestrians.
And absolutely, that's needed, and I think, you know, not to, you know, for the the staff's credit is, that was one thing I think we hadn't done at that point, was we had not contacted the railroad in terms of any of their requirements. We had approved the project prior to that, so not surprised that they would have some additional expenses. But I am a little concerned to see that the lighting plan is in there, that there's an additional cost for that, because that was specifically brought up. Now, it's $2,600. It's not huge, but that was a concern that was brought up at the point of the approval of the project.
My only response, yeah, and again, but to respond to your question, we did compare the request against the original scope, and it was not included. Should it have been, perhaps, but I can tell you it was not.
Any further discussion? Alderman Jacobson.
Obviously, this one was bid through a little bit different process than we're used to in terms of RFPs. Would an RFP have caught these issues or addressed some of these, obviously, in their overhead?
I think, I don't know. Sometimes it's difficult in a project, especially a complex project, to get the scope, to capture all the scope items. And sometimes there's unknowns from regulatory agencies that come up. Other times there are items, such as the lighting, I'm going to suggest, perhaps was just missed. I think it sounds like it was an issue that was discussed. And so sometimes as the scope document gets prepared, it's not always as thorough, as complete as it looks like at the end of the project when you know all the elements. So I don't know if I would suggest that your process is, needs any correction at this point.
There are some significant components of this that couldn't have been predicted at the time that the RFQ was done, or the initial scope was done as well, that as the project proceeded forward, the identification of the requirement to extend the coverage for the pedestrian underpass prompted additional need to look at the wind loading on that structure, and as it indicates, provide additional design for that. The Park District raised certain concerns about reorienting the path and its configuration through the park area to try and minimize the impact on some of the mature trees that were identified during the tree survey that was completed after the initial scope was completed. So there are aspects of this that came up as the process was ongoing that couldn't have been foreseen. I think certainly we understand the comments and concerns regarding the timing of presenting this to council, and we'll keep that in consideration prospectively.
Yeah, somebody mentioned 20/20 hindsight, and it's very applicable here. But Greg, you have a situation here where there's a near 20% difference between the original scope of 197 and the 35,000 that I would call extras or additions. I'm told that we have two options. Council can choose to authorize the payment in the amount not to exceed $35,466.42, or we can choose to reject the request and ask for a reduction in fees charged. What's the feasibility of item number 2? And secondly, does that put us in a relationship testing mode going forward with the project? Do you understand my question?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in on that one.
Sure.
If that's something the council's interested in, it would be our recommendation that instead of taking action on this tonight, that we revisit the topic with the consulting engineer that handled this project, which again was a different firm than Greg's firm, and explore that possibility with them and return this for consideration at a future council meeting. We certainly can explore that, and we're happy to explore that. I don't have a good way of assessing how viable that is at this time, but we would go back and re-review the scope again and have a good direct conversation with the consultant and see if it's possible to address any changes.
Well, the option was given to us, and it's only me as one person up here asking that question. We have a motion on the floor to approve the payment not to exceed $35,466.42, and we can have further discussion on this, and you've answered my question. I'm not suggesting that my question is going to lead us to do anything differently. Alderman Faber?
I appreciate your question. I would have expected that would have been done prior to bringing this to city council, that we would have gone back, we would have checked the scope. I believe you were.
We did.
You did?
Yes.
So, you know, I would go and try and negotiate it.
Okay.
But I would have expected that would have been done prior to bringing this to
Well,
the
if
city
in fact
council.
it's been done, then it shouldn't be given to us as an option.
True, but I would,
Yeah.
if somebody after the fact came and gave me a bill and said, I made there's some additional work that needed to be done, I would be questioning
Okay.
the additional work. That would be my direction, is to do it before bringing it to council for payment.
Alderman Jacobson.
I would assume in the original contract, there was probably a contingency in that one as well. I mean, I'm sure this isn't their first project. That this is what I do professionally, is large property projects. There's always a cost you didn't expect to come up, and you account for that in your original budget. I'd assume at $200,000 they had some sort of contingency budget built into there.
I am going to say I don't think so, and that's going to, I know that's not a real solid answer, but as someone who oftentimes prepares man-hour estimates and fees, because it is a competitive process, so typically you estimate the time it takes to do the project, and there's not if you build a contingency, you typically are the high cost and rarely would get selected. So I would say I don't believe there's a contingency built into their man-hours and at this point. Now, those are estimates. I'll be totally candid with you, and you estimate man-hours for tasks, and sometimes you do better and sometimes you do worse. But I don't believe that typically there's a contingency built in their fee.
Alderman Noriko.
Greg, as I recall, you did reference that you had gone back to Hampton. You know, it doesn't sound like there was any significant reduction in this additional amount, but am I correct in assuming that you were trying to point out that, yes, there had been an adjustment?
Yeah, so let me give you just a touch of detail on that. So when the original request came in, we requested for justification, not only in terms of the scope items, we could go compare the original scope, but then we asked for the man-hour projections, because with the bid, they provided man-hours for each task, so we could compare those. What they had done originally in their original request was their fee structure was different than the original contract. It was a standard hourly rate versus a cost plus fixed fee, and I won't go into the details. So I asked them to adjust that based on the original contract, which brought the price down. It was not significant, maybe $1,000. It was, but it put it on the terms of the original contract, which would have been appropriate and resulted in a, my response to them was, if they want to use standard rates, that's great, but only if it's favorable to the city. If it's not favorable, you go back to the original terms, and that's what we'll go by. So that was the minor adjustment that I referenced.
We appreciate your work on this, you and staff. Staff is recommending that we authorize the payment not to exceed $35,466.42. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Alderman Jacobson.
I would move to table it to the next meeting to at least try to have that discussion. I mean, obviously, in doing so, it doesn't put us back any. They've already performed the work. It's just delaying when we write the check to see if they're willing to have that discussion and negotiate it down further.
We have a motion on the floor. Is
I'll
there a second?
second it.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Alderman Jacobson, seconded by Alderman Favor. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Point of clarification, it's not an amendment, it's
Yeah.
a motion to table.
That's right. It's a motion to table. That is correct. Any further discussion?
Mr. Parliamentarian.
Roll call.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
So in tabling that, I understand then the Negotiation with the firm will be made, and that will be brought back at a subsequent city council meeting. Okay, let's move on. Item number 6, Resolution 2017-094, authorizing the negotiation and execution of a pedestrian undercrossing agreement with Union Pacific Railroad for the Kishwaukee-Kiwanis multi-use trail in an amount not to exceed $50,000. I'd ask for a motion to bring this to the table.
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Fanouken.
Second.
Second by Alderman Markwart. Any discussion? We once again turn to our Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman. Or Greg, are you going to stay up to Greg? Okay, thank you. Tim, you
pleasure.
deferred to Greg again. Okay, very good. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. This item, again, same project, different element. This agreement that's before you is with the Union Pacific Railroad, and it allows the path to cross their property, and it's typical and conventional, whether it's a bridge over the railroad facility, under the railroad facility, or a utility crossing the facility, then an agreement with the railroad is typically made. The agreement itself has several provisions in it that sets forth the terms and conditions under which that city use and public use will occur. It provides definition of the scope of the improvement. It defines the notice requirements if maintenance is to be done or during construction. It defines the term of the agreement, what happens if the facility, if the path is abandoned, what's the city's obligation. It talks about maintenance of the path. It also sets forth the terms of liability. And finally, it defines expense, and that's the dollar value that's in the motion here. And that expense includes really 3 primary elements. And the Union Pacific is willing to enter into agreements with governmental bodies, but generally their position is so long as it's no cost to them. And that's again fairly typical. There's 3 elements of the expense, and I'll discuss the $50,000 value that's presented to you. Those 3 elements are what I call the consideration. So there's always an exchange of dollar value. Oftentimes you might have seen it on an easement in consideration of $10. The grantor grants to the grantee such rights. So there's a consideration value. The second part of the expense the UP is looking for is the review of the plans. They spent time reviewing the engineering plans from Hampton Lenzini and have approved them. They find that the protection and so forth is appropriate. The final element of the expense is for flagging during construction, and they have identified that in the agreement that when construction is in or near the railroad facility, the way it works is you're obligated to hire their flaggers. Their flaggers are specially trained. They understand railroad operations and communications with the railroad. It's obviously safety along a rail facility is critical. And so the way you typically operate is when you're working in and around a railroad, you notify them. There's a permit process. You notify them. Their flagger comes out, and then the cost of the flagger is borne by the agency requesting the facility. So those are 3 elements: consideration, review of plans, and then the flagger cost. The flagger cost is not a known cost. It's estimated. This is the Union Pacific's estimate based on the plans and what they anticipate their flagger cost to be. So they have provided us an estimate of those costs. What we are seeking tonight, as we work through the agreement with the Union Pacific, is a not to exceed amount of $50,000. If you'll have looked in your packet, you'll notice some different values in there that are quite a bit less than the $50,000 value. They've estimated at this point their review fees to be $10,000, and again, that's an estimate. The flagger cost to be $12,000, and the consideration value, we're still waiting back to hear from them to fill out the agreement and complete the agreement. And once we get that, we've asked them what the upset number of that would be, and we've heard of range of fees up to $10,000. The reason we're asking for a $50,000, I'll say, allowance on this or budget on this item is because this item is critical for the project to proceed. In order for the contractor to get a right of entry permit, the Union Pacific needs to have this agreement with the city in hand. And so this, along with the contractor's right of entry agreement, goes to the Union Pacific and will allow us to proceed with construction. Again, the project was designed, bid, we've got a contractor, we're ready to go. This becomes a critical element for us to move the project forward and to begin construction. So we've asked for your permission to proceed up to that dollar value. As you'll note, that the dollar value exceeds some of the estimates we've had, but we believe this is an appropriate range to seek from you tonight. And I think I've probably done enough talking on this and see if there's further questions regard to this item.
Any further discussion items on this? Alderman Verbeek.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to amend this motion to read that staff is requesting the not-to-exceed amount of $35,200, which is a 10% not-to-exceed variance. And I would also suggest that as consideration for council on any future agreements to somewhat contain this amount so that as we have a more firm amount, that agreement can come back to us for our full approval. So I make that motion.
Including the proviso that all future considerations? That was simply an addendum.
Yes,
so
simply an idea, but
okay.
yeah,
So basically what you're looking at is a 10% override in the estimated overrun on this, which would be 35.2, you said?
35,200, please.
It's been seconded that we amend to the motion by Alderman Verbeek. Any second to that amendment motion?
Second that.
Who seconded that? Jacobson. Alderman Jacobson. Any further discussion?
If I can, Mayor, the
Yes.
only, again, part of this, what we don't know, the consideration they're requesting, part that we do know is the hourly cost for the flaggers, which is quite significant. And the flaggers are required to be on site anytime there is any kind of construction work occurring. Even though this is occurring under the railroad tracks, they station flaggers, 2 flaggers, one at either end of the project, to engage in that activity and maintain a safe working environment. If there is any kind of delay, if there's a single day's delay, the cost of the 2 flaggers, I think, will exceed the 10% contingency that you've contemplated. So if this is set as a not to exceed with that narrow of a range on this particular project, I have a concern that any kind of construction delays would either cause us to have to put the project on hold pending coming back to council for additional consideration, or exceed the council's not to exceed, which would defeat the point of the not to exceed. So I certainly understand that concept in many circumstances. Again, the narrow concern here is with regard to the flagger costs that we can't really control. So if the council would give any consideration to that portion of it, perhaps, that might be able to address this.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Alderman Fanouken.
Just that, I'd like to echo what Dean said. That'd be my concern too with that low not to exceed amount. I think on this one that I think we'd be better off leaving it to 50, and because that still gives us a cushion, but it doesn't automatically mean it's going to go to 50. So.
Any further discussion? Let's vote on the amendment. Excuse me. Oh, Alderman Jacobson. Sorry.
From my understanding, they want us to pay them $10,000 just to say yes. I mean, what does that $10,000 fee cover?
It's essentially, you can think about it as purchasing an easement. It's purchasing the ability, the land interest to run this under the railroad tracks, and their agreement to interact with us prospectively with regard to all of the relationships that they have to manage for this. They have a very exclusive monopoly over that land and aren't under an obligation to grant this approval. So it's just like when we're purchasing easements for other properties. That's what you can view this as the equivalent of.
And have we discussed if they'd be willing to waive that?
We certainly have, and that's something that we continue to pursue. We're also continuing to pursue the language of the easement agreement itself. The first draft that they proposed had very, very restrictive language that would For example, it would prohibit us from picking up garbage on the site without having flaggers on site and giving them 10 business days notice. So there are parts of their customary agreement that certainly protect the railroad's interests but aren't as applicable here to something that will be grade separated. So we're working through those issues. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, they have the absolute right to reject this agreement and not grant the city access with an underpass.
Any further discussion? First of all, now we're voting on the amendment. Mike's amendment, as he moved, is that we choose to authorize staff to negotiate in an amount not to exceed $35,200. Roll call.
Noriko?
No.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
No.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
No.
Markwart?
No.
Fagan?
No.
Motion fails.
Now we move to the original motion that we authorize staff to negotiate and execute in an amount not to exceed $50,000. Any further discussion on that? Roll call.
Verbic?
No.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
No.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Motion passed.
What? Point of clarification, what did you say?
Passed.
You said motion passed, right?
Yeah.
Resolution.
The
Yeah, we
resolution
were just
passed.
discussing that. Yeah.
The
And I
resolution
need to
passed.
call mayor's vote.
Okay.
Smith?
Yes.
She said fail.
Resolution passed then. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, if you recall, thank you, Greg, and thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Now we move, if you recall, we moved an item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda, and that is Resolution 2017-090, authorizing an agreement with the DeKalb Community Unit School District 428 to provide emergency medical services for DeKalb High School home football games for the 2017-2018 school year. I take a motion to get this on the table, please.
So moved.
Been moved by Alderman Fanouken.
Second.
Second by Alderman Verbeek. Our Fire Chief, Eric Hicks, will address this issue. Eric?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Like the mayor said, up for your approval tonight is an agreement with the DeKalb County School District 428 to provide emergency standby at the home football games this year for the DeKalb High School. Currently, there are about 5 games scheduled with some possible games for some tournaments. So that's why we currently this year have it listed as $500 per day. So that gives us a little leeway in case there's an additional game or two added throughout the year. The agreement calls for us to staff the event with 1 ambulance, advanced life support capability with 2 paramedics. Those paramedics will be working at the negotiated 7G rate, which is quite a bit lower than the overtime rate. That's why we're able to do this for $500 a day. We've had a long-standing relationship with the school district providing this service for at least the last 5 years that I've been chief. And I'm asking for your consideration and approval of this tonight.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this. Any further discussion? Alderman Fanouken.
Just a quick question. I don't know or don't recall if it's DeKalb or Sycamore's home game this year at Husky Stadium. If it's Sycamore's home game, do they pay or does DeKalb still pay?
That's done through the event contract at NIU. They're staffed and billed through the contract at NIU.
Through NIU then?
Nothing to do with the school district at
All
that
right,
event.
thank you.
Tony.
So I'm in favor of the agreement. The reason that I asked that this be taken off the consent agenda is that this is an intergovernmental agreement between the city of DeKalb and the school district. And as such, I feel that even though it's something we have done in the previous, it's something I'm sure we'll be doing in the future, I just feel that this intergovernmental agreements are a little bit more weighty, a little more important than, approving the salary of last month or the bills that have been paid last month. We had this discussion last year and took this off the consent agenda last year. My impression and my hearing the review of the minutes, my impression was that was the direction of City Council, was to remove intergovernmental agreements from consent agenda. But I just wanted to bring that forth. That might be another discussion topic, maybe not for this particular item, but that is the reason why I requested that it be removed.
And I know there's some disagreement as to what action the city council took in previous meetings that you alluded to, Tony, and I know Anne Marie, you wanted to say something on that.
Sure. First of all, Mayor, this is a policy issue, so if the council wants intergovernmental agreements to be listed as items for separate action, we can do that. I think last year there was a revision to the agreement. There had been intergovernmental agreements that had been handled at the staff level previously. Okay. So when this item was removed, and I believe from the consent agenda at that point, the discussion centered on intergovernmental agreements always coming to the city council. So both the chief's recollection as well as mine reflect that. We went back, double checked, we pulled the minutes, we reread the minutes. So what it reflected, in fact, there was a specific quote from Alderman Marquardt of saying that any intergovernmental agreement item is requested to come to council for review and action, not handled at the staff level. Since then, this was August of last year, we have done that. Any of the intergovernmental agreements are coming before you, no matter how small, whether it's a housekeeping or item. So we do not believe at that time staff received direction to make sure intergovernmental agreements were not listed on the consent agenda, but as items for separate action. We will follow whatever direction that you want, whether you want them on consent. As I shared with the mayor earlier today, I do get conflicting direction from other council members who have encouraged putting as many items on the consent agenda, especially this is one where it's the same basically agreement year after year. We will follow whatever the general consensus of the council is, whether you want them on the consent agenda or whether you want them items for separate action. But we are bringing intergovernmental agreements to the council for your review and action.
Okay, thank you.
And the only minor caveat is, as the council knows, from time to time, we have public safety intergovernmental agreements that we do with other police agencies that relate to special operations that we're undertaking with them that aren't of a sort that lend themselves well to public discussion. And those the police chief is authorized to undertake. And certainly when they have any expenditure or anything that has budgetary implications, we certainly do bring those forward, but otherwise that would be the one category that, consistent with that previous discussion, from time to time those are undertaken at the staff level.
Okay. So I would just say that it would be good to, get the consensus of council. I'm willing to, abide by the, whatever the council, again, I just felt that I understood it a little different, but I'm okay to have that discussion. I'd like that.
What I admire about this city council is that we don't always agree on everything, and that we have good discussion. And my point after you brought it to my attention to remove it, Tony, was simply saying, that's fine, you asked for it, we'll remove it. And that's why I asked our city manager, and then she did say something that I thought was very good, and that was that, I think it was Alderman Finucane who has argued in the past that we need to move these meetings along, and some of the, what I would call routine matters can be put on the consent agenda. That's the whole idea of a consent agenda. So, but I appreciate the comments on that. Alderman Finucane.
Well, in light of City Manager Dora's comments, that maybe this could be a future cow item that we could discuss to get a consensus of where council sits on putting items on consent. Just a thought.
Alternatively, if you have direction tonight, we will follow. I mean, I want to make sure for the next agenda, if you have one particular avenue, unless you want to get more in depth, but if you want to provide that direction tonight, we can accept that as well.
My only thought was that in light of a discussion of a particular item, that maybe that discussion wasn't appropriate at this time.
Okay.
Any other items of discussion? It's been moved and seconded then that we pass this motion. Roll call, please.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you very much. Thank you, City Council. Are there any items, is there any communications from our public tonight? Anybody like to address us? If not, I understand there is no new or unfinished business. So we move along to the final portion of our regular City Council meeting this evening, and that's communications. And I'd like to ask each of the council members if they have anything to report or communicate. Alderman Jacobson.
No report.
Alderman Fanouken.
No report.
Alderman Markwart.
No report.
Alderman Fagan.
No report.
Alderman Noriko.
Yes. No, seriously, I just want to thank city staff and the Northwestern representatives for the time, effort, and professional and cooperative spirit that was demonstrated in working on this agreement. I can only imagine the number of hours and discussions, and I would only wish that our legislators in Springfield would look to DeKalb as an example of intergovernmental cooperation.
Thank you, Kate. Alderman Verbeek.
Well, congratulations and welcome to Gura Kura, new grocer in the 6th Ward, who took the business Copy Service to open this grocery, and is still maintaining Copy Service. So was not able to make the event this afternoon, but congratulations. Secondly, please join us Saturday, August 12th for 50 Men Who Cook, which benefits CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Abused and Neglected Children, which will be on Saturday, August 12th at 6 p.m. at Barsima Alumni and Visitor Center. And we are cooking for our 13th year, which is our top fundraising event for CASA. So please join us.
Are you going to be cooking something, Mike?
Absolutely.
Can you give us a sneak preview?
Pot de crème à chocolat, which is a dessert item, of course. It's a kind of a chocolate custardy thing with cream on top.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Alderman Favor.
No report.
I'd like to make just a few comments before we turn it over to our staff for their reports. We have several committee of the whole meetings upcoming, and for the benefit of our audience and those who are watching us on TV this evening, we have two regular committee of the whole meetings scheduled yet this summer. One will be on streets and fleet. Another will be on the strategic plan, the quarterly update. There will be 2, perhaps 3 special committee of the whole meetings. One tomorrow evening, very important, Annie Glidden North. That will be held right here tomorrow evening. Our TIF phase-out committee of the whole, we're probably going to definitely need a special committee of the whole meeting on that. That will be held sometime in August. And I have been reminded a number of times that we do need part 2 of our FOIA, our Freedom of Information Committee of the Whole. That has not yet been scheduled, but we will make sure that that is scheduled. The public may have noticed, and I hope they read the document, that the mayor was invited to participate in the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. This would have cost the city a few dollars, not much, because it's based on what we pay the mayor in the city of DeKalb. But after investigating that it would take 10 years for vesting into the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, yours truly decided that I would opt out of any decision to get involved with the IMRF. So, and you probably understand why I may have opted out after a 10-year vesting requirement. I have this Frisbee. This was given to me on Saturday when we reopened one of the real jewels in our community, and that's Lions Park on Taylor Street. It was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. A lot of people, a lot of kids, some good donuts, Gene, and coffee. And I was told by the city council that I should, or by the park district folks, that I ought to throw this out, but I'm afraid I'd need to talk to our city attorney if I hit somebody, right? So I will not throw that out. We have Kish Fest all week, starting I think tonight. There's a large parade Friday, over 90 units that Mike Embry has put together. That's a parade that will start down on 7th Street, wind its way to Lincoln Highway, and end down at the Van Buren Plaza. Over the past couple of weeks, I have been asked by a couple of people who read the Chronicle religiously that I have not been in Chamber of Commerce ribbon cuttings. To those folks, I would simply say, I have a list of priorities as your new mayor, and attending each and every ribbon cutting has not been on there. I did attend one today at Guru Krupa, and I think the folks realize from the chamber why I have been absent from some of the Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting pictures. However, guys, I took the advice of Alderman Jacobson, who said, what a wonderful idea it would be if at those ribbon cuttings that the mayor can't make it, one of our city councilmen might do that. So I'm going to look at where your wards are and where they're positioned. So I'm going to try to do that because we certainly want to recognize our businesses, our industry, and those who have ribbon cuttings. But I wanted to sort of explain why I haven't been at quite a few of those. And finally, Mike Verbeek asked that we perhaps take a look at the state of the city, which I'm going to be taking part in as part of the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce State of the City event over at Ferranda's on August 10th. You all should have received an invitation on that. I hope any of our city councilmen and our city staff are able to come over to that. A couple of the key speakers that day, in addition to me, I'm going to have Anne Marie say a few words on behalf of the city. I'm going to take a pretty good portion of the city's part, and it's simply my take, if you will, city councilman, that what I see we are doing in terms of the city. You know, I'm not going to gloss over some of the problems we have in our community, but I'm also going to not gloss over some of the promise and some of the opportunities we have going forward. I'm so invigorated by what I see in our community of people who want to step up and help. So that will be an August 10th event. And then the following Monday, what we're going to try to do, Mike, is I'll try to take sort of a microcosm of those events and bring that forward. I think what we need to do is, if in the future our city council feels that public remarks by the mayor are something that the city council wants to take a look at in advance, I'd certainly be open to that. But I think this has been an event that they've had for a number of years, and trust me that I'm not going to say anything that is going to be too outlandish as it relates to this city council. Having said that, I'm going to now move along the row over here to see what communications we might have. Sue Herman, our city clerk, any communications?
I do actually have just one. So
Good.
at the last city council meeting, I had mentioned that I was organizing an event for Clean Up DeKalb. I just received notification a couple hours ago that my flyers were received, so now I can formally invite everyone to participate in my event. I think I had mentioned that the tentative date and time was August 19th, and we're going to start at 9 a.m. That is definitive. We're going to go ahead and move along in that direction. We're going to start at Huntley Park over behind the downtown area on 3rd and Prospect, and then we're going to go until noon, and anyone who's willing to participate is more than welcome. Coffee and baked goods provided by the Lincoln Inn. Thank you.
Dean Frieders.
Thank you, Mayor. As you referenced, Kitschfest is kicking off this week. As late as Friday, we are meeting with Mr. Mike Embry to put the finishing touches on his event agreement that the council had previously authorized. He has some really great ideas for events to bring to this community, and he's already scheduling out events for 2018. We are planning on meeting with him early this fall and discussing those events and getting them all scheduled out so that we can bring them to council much earlier and get council and public feedback on them and have everything lined up well in advance and try and use that as a model for other similar event planning, so far ahead in the pipeline. Mr. Embry has been, as always, incredibly cooperative to work with the city and has great ideas on how to organize the event and looks not only to minimize the impact on the public but also to minimize the impact on city operations while really making them great events for the community. So we look forward to another Safe Kitschfest this year and to many more great events next year.
Thank you. City Manager Anne Marie Gora.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As an outgrowth or building on your comment in regards to our special committee of the whole meeting tomorrow on the Annie Glenn North revitalization plan, I just want to add a couple specifics. As you may know, this is an item that is listed in the strategic plan, and as a component of that, staff has been working with members of the community to kind of highlight and explain this particular project, not only recently, but over the last approximately year or so. In the last week plus, we have reached out to some segments of the community in anticipation of your meeting tomorrow night on this topic and have given them a preview of the presentation. And I just want to specifically talk about some of the partners in the community. So along this discussion, the school district, the park district has been included. They were at one of the meetings in particular last week. And I also wanted you to know that we have encouraged the people and the various organizations that they're represented to come to tomorrow's meeting based on the feedback that you've given of us most recently at some other presentations. So we've encouraged attendance so that people can hear the presentation directly. We've also encouraged them to reach out to you as elected officials if they have a strong opinion one way or the other on this topic. So just wanted to give you advance notice that we have encouraged that attendance, so if you see more people in that room, you know why. So with that, that's all I just wanted to highlight on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our Assistant City Manager, Patty Hoppenstedt.
No report.
Gene Lowry, our Police Chief.
No report.
Eric.
No report.
Jeff Wilkins, our Interim Finance Director.
Just one quick comment.
Sure.
Follow up to the pension presentation. One thing, IMRF does use a 7.5% ROI or return on investment, which they do consistently meet. And then I know the police pension does exceed the numbers that Citibank uses, so they're in the 5%. And of course, there's now a little bit more flexibility. They're moving more investments to equities off of the fixed income. So the one number that is again that Moody's uses is very extremely conservative. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Jeff. Community Development Director Joe Ellen Charlton.
Hi, just real quickly, of the many roles that I serve within the community, I am also the city's representative to the DeKalb County Regional Planning Commission. They don't meet monthly, but they meet about every other month. They meet this Thursday at 6:30. It's a really good opportunity for all of the community representatives to get together and share ideas about what's happening in their communities and to discuss items that the county staff identifies as being important for us. So on their agenda, we're going to hear about the county's comprehensive economic development strategy their progress to date, as well as a discussion on the practices regarding drinking water resources planning and management. So just a couple of items on their agenda, and I'll make sure to keep you informed.
Thank you. Tim Holdeman, our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor. As I'm sure our residents know, 23 is being resurfaced. They're working on the sidewalks, the ADA ramps now. We will be initiating our water main projects over the next couple of weeks, and the street maintenance projects are up and running. I would direct people's attention to the city website for a weekly update on our construction progress. Thank
We
you.
survived the storm pretty good, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We were very fortunate. We had very minimal damage and no flooding. I think there were a few outages over the weekend, electrical outages, but nothing significant.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Chris Randall?
No report.
And finally, our IT Director, Mark Thorson.
No report, Mayor.
We do need a executive session tonight, I'm told, and I would ask the council for, or ask someone to make a motion to hold an executive session.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Dean?
Could we request that you cite the specific exemption? So we're requesting an executive session to discuss pending or imminent litigation as provided for in 5 LCS 120/2C11.
Right. Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn for an executive session. All in favor? Or roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
We will now move to executive session.